what goes up.
Oi, Marie! Oi, Marie!
Deep in the heart of Texas.
The shadow knows.
I bet it's Manischewitz.
No, lady. I buy strictly American.
Time now for spinning my dad's vinyl. Here with all his skips, scratches, and pops is my dad, Frank Vaccarello.
Thanks, sweetie. Thank you for tuning in to episode 204 of Spinning My Dad's Vinyl. For our last stop during World Tour November, we head to a region of the world known for its beaches and casinos, to where the rich have played for centuries. 3 different countries' musical styles are included on this record: Spain, France, and of course, Italy. In fact, the music you will hear was composed by a prince of the Holy Roman Empire. His scores create musical landscapes in your mind. So, get ready to hear music that gets us into a Mediterranean mood with Volume 204, Riviera Paradise. There is D'Artega and his orchestra with Palace of the Prince, composed by Italian Prince Camillo Ruspoli, the last prince of Condriano. The florid pen of Prince de Condriano paints a colorful picture of castles engulfed in regal splendor as his musical invitation card to beckon the listener for a visit to Monaco. Now, I'll be using those notes from the album cover to introduce each tune from here on out. Okay, why this record for this episode? Because the beautiful beach on the album cover beckoned me to consider it for a destination on our World Tour November. One that I'll probably never be able to afford, but I'll visit vicariously. Turns out this is music from a composer that never really had his music recorded until after his death. The liner notes will explain that story. So this album combines 2 things: an unfamiliar composer and unfamiliar music. But as usual with unusual finds in my dad's collection, there is some sweet music here. And I think each song sets the mood that was intended for each region it was written for. All right. Next up, let's head out for a moonlit walk. Two young lovers seated in a dimly lit cafe in an empowered nook at a table for two, enveloped by the heady fragrance of night-blooming flowers tinged with the pearly opalescent moonlight. Interplay of solo violin and full orchestra describes the emotions of the lovers as their hearts speak to each other in silent dialogue. Hours afterward, they walk out into the deserted streets until the dawn turns off the moon. Very pretty. Monte Carlo, Nocturne. Okay, let me tell you about my dad's vinyl I am spinning for this episode. D'Artega and his Orchestra, Riviera Holiday, Mediterranean Moods. It's on the Design Records label, number DLP46. It's a vinyl LP mono format, released in 1957. Its genre is jazz and its style is easy listening. We will hear 6 of the 11 songs on the album. Now, I'll be using the orchestra leader's liner notes on the composer later, but that leaves me with this paragraph. Are you in love? Have you ever been in love? Are you looking for love? If so, this is the music for you. Here is a glorious high-fidelity vacation on the romantic Riviera. Join us as we try to break the bank at Monte Carlo, walk the surf-swept beach under diamond-studded skies, make love's promises, and as you love, so shall you live. Peek with us into the tiny principality of Monaco, home of that famed princess from Philadelphia. Wrap yourself in the soul-searching loveliness of the Côte d'Azur and the sparkling west coast of Italy. Here, in its Discovery series, Design is proud to present the delightfully romantic music of Camillo Rispoli, Prince de Condriano, a man of fire, romance, and melody, a man who saw beauty in the rising and setting of the sun over his villa, excitement in a dewdrop, piquance in the bull's lunge at the toreador, magic in the sandpiper's song. Close your eyes and join us on our luxurious Pan-American Stratocruiser as we fly to the romantic Riviera. Sip your champagne and tingle with anticipation. Here is your Riviera holiday in Hi-Fi. Okay, let's see what prices this record is being sold at on Discogs.com. It's only been sold twice there, $16.45 and $2.35 for a $9.40 average and median. It was last sold on March 27th, 2023 for that low price. Now, I saw several on eBay from $4 to $15 and a couple on Amazon for around $15. Now, my dad's record is in fair to poor condition. There aren't many pops except that one that started the album, or much hissing between the album tracks despite the enormous amount of wear marks on the surface. He probably had this record since before my parents were married, probably while they were dating, hence the love theme. The cover is in poor shape. A small tear near the opening, lots of little white specks where the printed paper has come off the front cover, where he also has 3 address labels stacked. I'm sure the bottom one is the one from my parents' first house that they owned. The back cover, which shows plenty of wear as if it was handled a ton, has one of the most straight green magic marker streaks I've seen on any of these albums. So I'll value my dad's vinyl at 50 cents. Next up, and it is on my bucket list, the calm serenity of Eventide is eloquently expressed by a musical tapestry of strings, a glorious Mediterranean sunset in every variation of color greets the eye. Towards the middle of the composition, the orchestra increases in volume. A rush of night winds bring fast-moving clouds to temporarily darken the horizon. The peaceful, tranquil strains return. The red sun sinks in the far horizon, and the first evening star appears, winking in the blue of the evening. Mediterranean Sunset. Now let's learn a bit first about the man who discovered the music, arranged it, and then led the orchestra that recorded it. Alfonso D'Artega was born June 5th, 1907 in Silao, Guanajuato, Mexico, and often known simply as D'Artega. He was a songwriter, conductor, arranger, and actor. His family emigrated to the U.S. in 1918. He became a well-known conductor on stage and on air, and in 1946 initiated the Carnegie Hall Pops concerts with members of the New York Philharmonic. In 1947, he played the role of Tchaikovsky in the film Carnegie Hall, conducting the film score as well. He was guest conductor with, among others, for the Buffalo Symphony Orchestra, the Miami Symphony Orchestra, the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and the NBC Symphony of the Air. D'Artega wrote over 50 songs. Perhaps his most widely recognized composition in the U.S. is the NBC Chimes theme. He died January 20th, 1998. Alfonso D'Artega was 90. Now here's what I found out about the composer. Camillo de Principi Ruspoli was born January 10, 1882 in Rome, Italy. He was the second and last Principe di Condriano, and he was a prince of the Holy Roman Empire. He was chief of the Black Shirts of Cuba. They were the Italian fascist paramilitary. In January 1920, Camillo arrived in Havana on the steamship Governor Cobb from Key West. He bought a citrus farm in Sabalos, Avila. In 1920, Ruspoli was a deputy to Congress for the province of Avellino. He had been a member of the army as captain of engineers and was awarded the Croix de Guerre. Now, I'll fill you in a little more during this episode's interesting side note, but here's what D'Artega wrote about the Prince in the liner notes. There is an interesting and touching story behind this music. Camillo di Condriano wrote music all of his life, yet only a few people heard it during his lifetime. He passed away without realizing that he had made a major contribution to the world of music. I met his widow, Princess di Condriano, in the fall of 1955 on one of her rare visits to New York. I played a few of her husband's compositions on the piano and immediately became interested. I saw dates on the manuscripts dating back to 1930 and asked why the world had never heard this truly lovely music. The princess then told me her story. Camillo was a quiet, unassuming man who never boasted of his musical accomplishments. Being a brilliant pianist, he often played for close friends and relatives, but his melodies were never heard outside of his select circle. The prince passed away in 1949, and his devoted wife, in her grief and sorrow, put his manuscripts under lock and key. She feared the increased anguish that hearing them might bring her. Hers was truly an all-embracing love. One night, she told me, she had a dream in which she saw Camillo at the piano playing one of his melodies. He asked that she have his music played again. He seemed to say that hearing it would bring her consolation. This album is the fruition of her efforts to create a living memorial to her beloved prince. What a touching story. Next up, a playful melody transports the listener to enchanted gardens where whispering trees wafted with the perfume of jasmine and gardenias serve as a setting for a boy and girl seated on a gentle slope of green turf and nodding flowers, lost in their love dreams. Gardens of Beau, Lieu. Time now for this episode's interesting side note, and it has to do with the arrest of this music's composer. On April 23, 1942, the Cuban newspaper Diario de la Marina reported in a brief note, "The Italian Prince Camillo Ruspoli has been arrested and imprisoned as a dangerous foreigner. The police accuse him of being one of the directors of fascism in America. He has lived for years in Cuba, where he owns many properties. The prince has a collection of yachts that the police have seized." Unquote. Camillo Ruspoli, an Italian prince, who was indeed arrested in Cuba on April 23, 1942, due to suspicions of fascist affiliations, had a relatively brief period of detention. He remained in custody for around 3 months before being released. His release likely came about because of a lack of substantive evidence linking him to fascist activities, despite initial accusations and for his professed love of Mussolini. Following his release, Ruspoli continued to live in Cuba for some time, albeit under more scrutiny and with greater limitations on his activities. After his arrest in 1942, his ability to leave Cuba was restricted primarily due to the geopolitical climate of World War II and his status as a dangerous foreigner. As an Italian national suspected of fascist sympathies, he was subject to both Cuba's internal security policies and the pressures from Allied forces to control Axis-affiliated individuals in the Western Hemisphere. Cuba, in cooperation with the United States, we did cooperate at one point, implemented measures to monitor and detain foreigners suspected of Axis ties to prevent potential subversive activities. Even after his release from custody, Ruspoli likely remained on the watch list, restricting his movements and his ability to leave Cuba. His assets, including his yachts, had been seized, which may have further impeded his financial freedom and capacity to travel. Well, there was a story I was not expecting to find when I did further research on the people involved in the music of this album. One of the most haunting melodies by this prolific composer is next. There is a note of sadness as we bid fond farewell to our holiday. Ever-changing moods, both melancholy and happy, are intermingled here. An English horn intones the main theme, echoed by plaintive strings. Later, the entire orchestra surges dramatically to a crescendo, crying this poignant minor motif with intensity. We take with us bittersweet memories to treasure in our hearts forever. It might be the last tune on the record, but it's not the last tune for the episode. Continental Memories. Now, I played that one there because I want to finish with a happier melody. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. It was quite a nice musical tour around the northern part of the Mediterranean Sea to finish up our World Tour November. In fact, this was very beautiful music arranged and performed very well by the D'Artego Orchestra. It's interesting listening to the contrast in musical styles that my dad collected. I really enjoyed the lushness of the orchestration, giving it a late 19th century feel. I think I remember this album being in the play stack at the house. The front cover image of that beautiful Mediterranean village is very memorable. And I have a feeling that my parents were probably courting when my dad picked this album to play for my mom. By the way, the title of this episode is actually a call out to the title of my second favorite Stevie Ray Vaughan tune. Plus, I really hope you enjoyed this special theme month as we jet set it around the globe. And finally, the expressive sound of solo windwoods usher in an interlude of rapturous springtime romance. We promenade through sun-kissed meadows, stroll through the streets where happy, carefree children romp and play, the musical lilt of their innocent laughter filling the fresh spring air. Plus, I wanted to make sure I finished with an Italian city. Sorrento Momento And there you have selections from an album fit for a prince, or composed by a prince. And we have now landed back home from our world tour November. So thanks for tuning into volume 204 Riviera Paradise, however you did. If you want more information about this show, head over to spinningmydadsvinyl.com. I'll be back next week with all my skips, scratches, and pops for volume 205 Big Band Chevy. Until then, go with the flow, my friends.